we are a problem-solving brand for moms.
We had never done cosmetology, never studied anything in that aspect. So started straight from figuring out what safe actually meant and then creating products. So ingredients could be all natural, but they could come together to become really toxic. First is, of course, ingredients need to be safe in their own aspects, and then the final product that comes together needs to be safe by itself as well.
Moms and Company, established in 2016. The founders are Mohit Sadani and Malika Sadani. Give a huge round of applause.
Thank you.
They offer 100% natural and toxin-free products with over 30 plus ranges, starting from pregnancy care, baby care, face care, hair care, and many more. Starting with their introductions, Malika, a Business World 40 Under 40 awardee. Before becoming an entrepreneur, she lived in London for about 5 years, prior to which she had an MBA from Wellinker and worked for a few years at ISC Bank. Mohit, who joined the rocket ship later on, had a faith in Malika's grit and did an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. Mohit comes with a rich experience in consulting consumer goods and retail companies from McKinsey. Amid many things, Mohit loves to play golf, squash, learning, and spending time with the founders in their 25 portfolio companies that they have. We'll be talking a lot about the Moms Company and their journey. But before that, can you throw us some light on your experiences in terms of your backgrounds, your family, education, and what made you to move into this foray?
So it's lovely to be here. I was just telling him that I think it's after a very long time that we have come back to a college. So it's very exciting to see all of you. And I think what's most interesting for me is everybody is beaming with joy. So that young blood that we all had. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for calling us. I'm an army officer's daughter, so I pretty much grew up across the country. My dad got transferred every 2 years, which meant it was adjusting to a new way of living, a new culture, a new set of friends that you make every 2 years, right? So that's how I grew up. I studied my 11th and 12th in science, post which I did my engineering in electronics, and then actually worked in a company called CMS Computers, which used to basically cater to networking, and they were the largest networking firm at that point of time. What was most interesting was that I did not take up a networking engineer-led job with them. I actually took a management-related job there, where I used to manage a center for them. And that's what I enjoyed the most, and hence after about a year and a half of working there, went ahead to do my MBA. I did an MBA in finance and very traditionally landed up joining the debt markets at ICICI Bank. Worked there for about a year and a half, 2 years. I think it was absolutely fantastic because, again, at that point of time, it used to be for us saying that early in the morning, you would walk into the treasury room and then they would tell you saying 1,000 crores. And that 1,000 crores had to be raised within the next 2 hours, right? So that was the amount of, it wasn't really stress, but that was what we went. And every day in the morning, we had no clue of what the number would be for the next day. Get that number within 2 years, you close that amount, raise the money for the bank, and then of course get done very quickly by 2:30. And then as opposed to what everybody else would say, I actually hit the gym at 5:30 every day on the same floor at ICICI Bank. So that was what we did. I think 3 years into it, I was expecting my first daughter, and Mohit got a transfer to London. That's when we moved to London, came back to India. What people don't know is that Momsco was not my first business idea. I actually wanted to open a creche because I thought after coming back, and there were a lot of women going back to work, but there was no place to leave the kids behind. So I wanted to start a chain of creches. It just so happened that we were in Bombay and the real estate never made sense. So the economics was never making sense. Gave up on that idea. And then, of course, 2 years after that started Momsco. Momsco started from a very personal journey. I've got 2 daughters. They're currently 12 and 9. When we started, they were 1 and 4. I remember, so really young and tiny at that point of time. We tried to look out for natural, safer skincare for them. Didn't find anything. And I think my retort was to go to Facebook groups. They used to be really big at that point of time. So go to Facebook groups and communities to reach out to other moms to ask them, saying, what is it that you've chosen? It was a time that was led with distrust for larger brands. I think we saw that there could be a space for something new because people are looking for it. What you have, people are not happy with. So clearly there was a gap, and that was where we started the mom school, with no background in what we did. We had never done cosmetology, never studied anything in that aspect. So started straight from figuring out what safe actually meant, and then creating products, learning the art of doing that, team building, and so on and so forth. I'm sure we're going to cover a lot of it during the course of it. So yeah, that's me.
Slightly different. So I grew up in the Middle East, in Bahrain, and a lot of my friends at the time, at the end of their 12th standard, so that 2000, we had to make a choice whether to go to US or come back to India. Right? There was no higher education in Bahrain as such. For some reason, I chose to come back to India. I was always very bullish, saying, this is where the future is going to be. So 2000, I moved back, did engineering from Thirdumas Shahani, Bombay University. Worked in TCS for 2 years. Realized 3 months into that job that I can't be doing this for the rest of my life. So spent a year and a half studying for CAT. Thankfully, IIM Ahmedabad happened. That was 6 to 8. And then joined McKinsey for 7 years. McKinsey was fantastic. I did a lot of work in consumer goods, retail, organization. That's why, as Malika mentioned, I got a chance to get a transfer to London. So I ended up working with some amazing global clients in London. And then again, came back to India. And a year and a half after that. And there was a point of time 7 years into my McKinsey journey where I said, I love work around consumer goods retail, but the real revolution is not happening inside McKinsey. It was happening in e-commerce at that time, right, 2014. And so with that intent, I joined Snapdeal, and I was heading growth and strategy at Snapdeal for a year and a half. During that stint, I really saw it looks like social media will be good for building brands, right? Back in the day, Instagram hadn't launched yet almost. And it looks like from e-commerce, we can supply that demand. And so when Malika said, hey, here is something, it's a problem for mothers, we should really come up with safer, better, natural options. I came at it with my experience saying, I think with social media, e-commerce, a brand here can be built. So let's try. And with that intent, Malika effectively hired me into the business back in 2016.
So while you guys were in college, did you happen to notice that, you guys will pick up entrepreneurship? Any thoughts back in those days?
I never thought I'll become an entrepreneur, to be very honest.
Yeah, I always thought I'd be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
The opposite.
So it's really funny, but I was very happy in my job at banking. I think it was super sexy to be a banker, and I really enjoyed it. I never thought it was stressful. So I completely loved it. My idea was to come back to pick up a job again there. So so absolutely not. I think motherhood led me to this journey. Had it not been for that, I would have definitely not done it. As opposed to Mohit, who always knew it.
The opposite. So I started my first business in Bahrain in school, where I used to read a lot, and so I made my bookshelf into a library. And then when 50% of those books didn't come back, I shut down the library, saying, okay, clearly I don't know. But that was my first real business in a sense. And then my dad was in the computer business. So when we moved back to India during my engineering, I had a side hustle for pocket money of assembling and selling computers. And then during campus and MBA, I said, I don't know my idea yet, but I did every entrepreneurship course possible. I said, McKinsey will teach me. And the idea was to stay in McKinsey for 2 years, figure out an idea, and then come. 7 saal lag gaye, right? The idea took a lot longer to come, and thankfully Malika had a great idea, so we could start. But it was always, I was almost like a half foot into entrepreneurship at every point of time.
Yeah. I remember I was on campus, and they have this crazy course for which people bid to be on the course. And it's the most expensive course on campus in terms of your credits that go. And I remember people shouting and screaming because they literally put all their credits on that one course, and that course was on entrepreneurship. So Mohit did give up a lot of his first year credits to be a part of that course. So yeah, I think you kind of always knew.
Yeah.
But what do you think is, the hardships of entrepreneurship, the side which people don't know about it?
I think now people know a lot. The best example I've had is in regular life. Let's say you're doing a steady job and so on. Your emotions go like this, right? A good day is a good day and a bad day is a bad day, but they go like this. When you have your first child, right, they start to go like this because you feel, oh my God, this is absolutely amazing. And if the child is ever sick, you'll say, oh my God, like shit is breaking apart, life is ending. Right? So it starts to go like this. When you're a founder, it goes like this, right? And it can happen during the course of a day. So I think the emotional strength it takes to deal with the highs. Like if you're doing well, if you crack a deal, you get some funding, PR is in your favor, the highs can feel very high. You feel almost like a mini celebrity saying, this is amazing. And then there are days where the bottom is out, right? Your team is leaving, your money is drying out, the PR is on the other side. The negatives of it can be very high, and this can happen very frequently, right? So when I meet founders now, I tell them the biggest strength you need is just emotional resilience, right? Because you have to be able to not get impacted by that yo-yo as much.
No, fair. That's a very good point. A lot of times people don't talk about the perils and the side which do not get select.
No, the good news is the PR cycle is on the opposite side right now. So you're only hearing the perils. You're not hearing all the goods.
This time around, yes.
This time around, yeah.
Among big and established giants like Johnson & Johnson, Dabur, Himalayas, coming across with, this idea of getting another D2C brand into the market. What is the genesis of your idea? What do you think, what gave you the lot of muscle to be able to fight with those?
I think there was two things. One, we were very naive. So we thought that, yes, taking on Johnson's is going to be,
doable.
Let's see, we'll see how it goes, right?
Let's give it a shot.
And the second was there's nothing to lose, right? I think all we had to lose was the savings that we had collected over the last 3 years, 7 years of working, and that's about it, right? So, and that was money, and we always thought money could always be gotten back. So how we weighed on the options was saying that, okay, suppose this does not do well, where will we be 3 years down the line? And we had given ourselves 3 years to say that we'll see how this pans out, because, and I think that's a really important advice I'll probably leave with anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur, right? Like, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you always know which direction your company is going in. You need to be super honest to yourself to say that do you really want to commit yourself to what you're doing, right? Because if you do well, it's great. If you don't do well, that's also fine, right? The problem is if you're moderately successful and then you get stuck and then you're not moving anywhere, right? So to be true to yourself is very important. And then, when we started, we were like, theek hai, itna paisa bank mein hai. So if this finishes, we need to go back to job. Will we find a job, or will people see us as a failure? And I think what we came out with there was saying that I think we would go back far richer with an experience that our peers wouldn't have had. And that kind of gave us the confidence saying that I think you can do what you have to do. And but we set a number in mind saying that if the bank balance reaches this, one of us will go back to a regular job, and if things don't change, both of us will go back to regular jobs.
Fair. Can you take us through the inception of Momsco, which talks more about how you had a fewer product lines to how you expanded into so many product lines?
So when we started, we launched, the original idea was to launch baby products because it came up from a problem for the baby. And, that was when we got a few very large industry mentors on board. And they said, don't take on Johnson's head on by just going again on the baby segment, because they almost control about 95% of the market share at that point of time in baby. So they said, let's take a slightly parallel path. So through conversations, we landed on saying that we'll do pregnancy first. So the first time a woman kind of starts thinking about safer products is when she gets pregnant. So we'll capture her then. It was a market that was fairly unoccupied by anyone. There wasn't too large a player and all. So we said we'll enter that. We will build confidence with the mother through the 6 months to 9 months of whenever she starts adopting us. And at the end of that is where we will launch our baby range, right, which was supposed to our main range. And I think the other thing that you need to know about entrepreneurship is that the founders need to be super agile. So our brand, which was supposed to be a baby care brand, actually landed up becoming a mom brand, because once we did pregnancy, the next set of questions to us came as, where are my post-pregnancy products? I have massive hair fall post-pregnancy, can you cater for that? I have a problem in muscle recovery, can you help with that? And then we started catering for that. Then we launched baby, and as soon as we launched baby, the questions came back to again mom. So the customers constantly kept telling us, saying that I want products for myself, I have stuff for my child. So baby range landed up being a part of the whole range, but a lot of focus for the brand actually became focusing on the mother and her needs and her skincare, her hair care, her body care as needs. So that's what happened during the course of it all.
So you were listening to the market, you were listening to the moms?
Yeah, all the time.
All of the time?
All the time. I remember there are days, and so we completely exited from the company recently, and I sent out a message to the customer care team saying, please go speak to them. And the customer care lead called me and of course, comes from a really large company now and all of that. So he said, why does this customer have your number? And I laughed and I said, you do realize that we were the customer care. And we used to pick up calls at 10:30, 11 at night as well. So there are a few people who actually have our numbers, right? And then there were days when Mohit and I actually went to deliver the orders, because that was the best way of getting customer feedback. So we would go in our car, stand outside the gate, knock on the door and said, here's your mom's parcel. Where more often than not, the people used to be really stunned, saying, who are you? And we said, listen, we are the founders of the Mom's Co. Love to get your 2 cents about it. So first there was a sense of disbelief, saying, are you really here? And then they would be like, okay, come inside. And I think we had some really deep, nice conversations with customers, their kids at some point of time, because I remember there was one instance when we went for delivery. The mother was still recovering from the shock that we were there. And this daughter comes and says, how do you know my name? Because what we used to do is if there was a baby order, we would send in a card with the name of the child saying like, dear so-and-so, I hope you like your parcel. And it was kind of, the idea was it would be a first letter you get from a brand. So she was like, how do you know my name? All my parcels come with my name. And the mother was telling her, stop talking, stop talking. But I think it was really interesting. I think we always had a huge takeaway at the end of the day.
You just learned so much.
Yeah.
My most interesting insight, so at that time, of course, I had McKinsey and then Snapdeal. And so I had saved up and bought a BMW 3 Series, like my pride and joy. And one of the deliveries was this woman, like I had to deliver a gift set to her. I asked her, where are you? I'm coming for your delivery. So she had got stuck in the rains at the club, like from a 5-minute walk from a house. I said, oh, sure. So I came. I said, I'm here. She said, where are you? I can't see you. I said, I'm here. She said, where are you? I can't see you. I said, okay, where are you? She said, I'm in the bike parking. I'm like, no, I'm in the grey BMW. And she's stunned. Like, kahan se aa gaya? What company is this? And then I said, no, sit, I'll drop you. You're close by. And in that 5 minutes, I figured out from her that, her sister-in-law is in Dubai and she wants to deliver it. Like, her sister-in-law has only asked for the Mom's Co pregnancy gift box. And so she's giving it. And that conversation became the insight to say, our pregnancy gift box is really creating waves and creating this massive demand. And so we double down on that.
Yeah.
Right? But you never know where these insights come from. So those conversations were amazing.
So these conversations also led to creation of some formal roles between the two of you. Who was managing what at the company?
Very different, actually. Not conversations, but more our own skill sets. I think when we got into the business, it was more because we wanted to do something different. And this seemed like a great idea to do together. But as we started working, we realized our skill sets are very different. So Malika was fantastic at brand building, marketing, product, right? Operations over time all reported to her. I was better on the sales side of it, so I would take care of the sales. I'd do a lot of the hiring, a lot of the fundraising fell on me. Right? But we managed a nice balance of completely different functions. And so on the functions, all of her calls were hers. On stuff that I did, she didn't need to look at it unless I put her in.
Yeah, I think the most interesting part of that was saying that it was not defined on day one. I think it evolved for us because we realized what we started enjoying in the business was very different. So marketing as a subject, so my options in MBA in my head was either HR or finance. I said marketing is definitely not where I'm going because I have zero bone of creativity. So this is something I'm never going to do in my life. And I think through the course at the Mom's Co, I ended up doing a large part of marketing, right? So I think the rules are not clearly defined in entrepreneurship. It's a very fluid moving curve, and then you figure out what you like and then eventually land up picking up what you do.
Yeah. Malika's official title in the company was CEO. My official title was CPO, so Chief Problem Solving Officer, which included like very crazy stuff to fix and also toilet mein flush nahi chal raha.
Toilet paper nahi hai.
Toilet paper nahi hai. Stuff like that as well. Right, so
Tell us a little bit of your emotional and happy part of your first product launch. How was it about?
So I think it was very different for the two of us. For me, I had zero emotions, but I had zero emotions even after I'd given birth to my first child. So I had zero emotions. I was just saying that, okay, let's figure out who buys it and then let's call them up to say, why did you buy it? So I approached it very differently. Mohit was very excited. I remember
wait, I have to describe this. Okay, so for me it was, so when our daughter was born, Myra, I remember holding her and like teary eyes and saying, oh my God, like this amazing child wouldn't exist in this world if we hadn't done it. I had the same reaction when a bottle came. I'm holding the bottle in a hand and saying, oh my God, this brand, this bottle, this product wouldn't exist. Even now I'm getting goosebumps as I talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. So I loved the idea of that creation. Right. Saying just the power of this wouldn't exist if we didn't do it. I love that piece of it. And so, see, still goosebumps.
So most of your time went into speaking to the customers, moms, the babies. Who was your intel generator, if I have to say?
Within the company or outside?
Outside the company, because a lot of times founders are engrossed in running the businesses, running the show. So who becomes the incremental knowledge creator for the founders?
Yeah, so we had a very strong set of mentors who constantly guided us, and I think as individuals we were very open to learning, because when we started what we did, we said we have no clue of what we're doing, right? So we're very happy to learn from others and kind of gather more information from others, and that was where it was. So I think a lot of times people who are ahead of you in the curve or people who have done it before. So for instance, our mentors included the global board member of Nestle based out of Switzerland. We had this guy called Shripad Nadkarni, who is India's marketing genius and guru, right? So they were really acclaimed, really big people. And what we did was we just went to them every time we needed help. So I think that they kind of constantly told us, say, okay, now you're at the stage where 2 months down the line, this is going to be a potential problem. And as optimistic as every possible founder is, we are like, of course not. We're not going to face that problem. Exactly 1 month later, we would face that problem. And we will go back to them to say that, okay, we are there. So now what do we do? So that's exactly what happened for us. A large part of intel in business actually comes from your consumers. How are they responding to the product? What are they liking? What's the next thing that they want? And there are a lot of tools available actually from a market research perspective and agencies who do the work for you. So that really is not the really hard part. The internal intel on getting to know what's happening within your company is super, super important. Mm-hmm. And you need to figure out your cohort of people within the company who will actually tell you where it is, because it is so easy for a founder to get involved in the day-to-day of what's happening and what's building, that you tend to forget what culture you're building, right? So I think that intel where someone comes and tells you, this is what's happening, is this what you want to build? Or if you don't want to build this, let's sit back and think what's the culture internally that you want to build. So that came from a certain set of employees.
And the culture that you wanted to bring in and create the entire organization into, was it achievable? Was it something that you have actually witnessed?
So we did. Eventually we did, but it wasn't easy. There was a lot of tools that were needed for it. There was a lot of, I think, commitment from Mohit and my part, because we suddenly realized that, as founders, you set the tone of what is going to be your company, right? So what you do is what becomes normal for the people to do, right?
Narrative building.
Not just narrative, it's just actions that you do. Mm-hmm. So for instance, I'm a workaholic. I don't mind working till 2 in the night. I suddenly realized that teams that reported into me were working till 2 in the night, right? Mohit gets up early in the morning at 5, so he would send out his emails in the morning. So there was a point in time where people who reported to both of us were actually getting mails till 2 in the night and 5 in the morning, right? And you just don't realize it. You just don't realize it because you're never switching off, and you kind of expect others never to switch off till someone walks up to you and says that, is this what you want to do? Because if this is what you want to build, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, right? But if this is something you don't want to build, and if you want to talk about work-life balance, it needs to start and stem from you, as an example. And that, I think, we had to inculcate in our own lives and then sort of trickle it down to people. I think we're very happy with the culture that we built, and anyone who was a part of the employee, like when we were leaving, everybody came and got it signed on a paper from us saying that I'm going to be your employee number 1, employee number 2, employee number 3. So I think a large sort of them are going to come back. And I think the eventual culture that we built within the Momsco was of a lot of hustle, a lot of ownership, and most importantly, a feeling of belonging in the Momsco. We were one very large family. So we've had, we've had some crazy examples. Like I had an employee who walked into my office. He was super emotional on that particular day, and I was like, what's wrong with you? This is not your normal self. He said, my wife is in the hospital. I said, then if your wife's in the hospital, why are you here? And why is she in the hospital? He said, we had a miscarriage last evening. And, I just froze right there. I said, and why are you here? He said, because the product launches tomorrow. And he was NPD head. So I was like, no matter what product launch is happening or whatever is happening, there is no reason for you to be here today. You need to be with your wife today. And I literally threw him out of the office, you know, and I did it publicly, where I made a conversation about it, saying that he's here today and this is what's happening in his house, and guys, this is not acceptable. This is completely unacceptable. And we sent him off and we said, you're not entering the office for the next 1 week, no matter whether it is a product launch tomorrow or whatever. There are other people who will figure it out. But I think it became very important to talk about those narratives openly to everyone, to be able to create that culture of people feeling comfortable in coming and talking about their vulnerable self of what they were going at home, because there was no one else who would understand it at that point.
Empathy started kicking in.
Massively. Yeah, we had instances where there were emails floating between two leaders, right? On one email here, the other email here. And I remember we just walked out of our office and we were like, listen, if I ever see an email conversation happening between two people who are sitting next to each other, both of you will be fired on the same day.
Yeah.
I would just get up and have a conversation. We're not a large company where everybody will send emails and say, I told him, you told me, this is not workable. But I think all of that gets solved because we made public conversations about it in front of everyone. So no matter how junior you are or how senior you are, you will have same access to information.
Yeah, I think we realized over time that one is culture doesn't happen organically, right? You have to create it. And the best way to create culture more than words on walls and so on is actually stories, right? Because human beings are storytellers and story listeners, right? We gravitate towards stories. So we had 6 elements of culture listed, but on each 6 we were made sure there is a story that you tell people, right? And this is how it happens. So like one example, we had one culture about being honest, because we said, how can we be a honest, safe, natural brand if we can be dishonest among each other, with our customers, like not live up to promises and so on. So be honest was a very deep-rooted culture. And we had one instance of an employee who said she was supposed to be somewhere or respond to a customer care executive actually, who was supposed to respond to something, Excel sheet where she was supposed to fill in data, she didn't fill in, and then she just blatantly lied about it in front of it, right? So it was a minor infraction in that sense. Nothing broke because of what she did. But we said this is a great example to create. And so we made a big noise around it, made a big hala. Actually, at the end of that day, that the girl was fired. Because we said, if you are in our company and you cannot even be honest with the person who is in front of you in your team member, what is the guarantee that you'll be honest with a customer who's basically a name on an order?
Actually, it was
Right?
slightly
Doesn't
more than
matter.
that. It wasn't that simple. It was basically that person had kind of done some sort of a fraud while in the process of doing it.
Yeah, but the
And
idea was we had to make sure that story was
told. We gave them an
and
option
resonated.
saying that own up to it, and if you own up to it, it's fine as long as you realize. She didn't own up to it. In fact, went on the loop of lying and lying and lying and lying. That was when we said this is unacceptable.
But then similar, right? Around taking ownership.
Yeah.
The same person, right? That example saying, guys, take ownership is fantastic, but there is a limit, right? And you have to tell those stories. So
Yeah, and I think what we did was we also got tools in place to kind of equip ourselves to how do we make culture. As people say, culture is not something that Mohit and I can narrate to people. It's a culture that employees narrate when Mohit and I are not in the room, right? So what we started doing was elements of culture that were really important to us. We started rewarding it.
Makes sense.
So we kind of created monthly and quarterly awards on creating heroes, people who went out of the way, and all of that. So that got converted. And then once that got converted into a physical award, so every month when you hand over the award, you will also tell the reason why that person has got the award. And that kind of really helped in setting examples, but setting the culture also for.
So we talked about 100% natural products and manufacturing toxin-free, products. Let's double down a little bit and understand how did you ensure that? What made you to figure out, this is the validation and this is the market fit. This is not something that you're looking for and this is something that you're looking for.
So actually qualifying natural wasn't really hard because it was defined. Plus every ingredient that you took actually had a report and a certificate that came with it saying that this is natural origin or not natural origin. What was the harder part was defining what we as a brand wanted to stand for. So how do we actually land up saying that I want to be natural, I want to be toxin-free, I want to stand for something which is really safe. So that was more of a task because once you've done it, there is enough and more means, ingredients, suppliers and everything as an ecosystem set up for you to kind of be able to manufacture it. For us, I think it stemmed from saying that people were gravitating towards natural Ayurvedic. So since the market was gravitating towards that, that's what we wanted to do. There was a full conversation happening on no chemicals, which is what we wanted to do. And the second conversation, because of Johnson's example on talc, was on safety and questioning safety of products, which is where toxin-free came into picture. And that's the two pillars on which we decided to build on the product. Once that was done, it was just about getting experts on board who could actually formulate the product for you. So,
And these experts were based out of India?
based out of India, Australia, US, Europe, everywhere, because we were building something that wasn't done before. So there were enough and more times that we got stuck. I remember there was this one instance where we were trying to create a shampoo and that shampoo would just not lather. And, so we said, okay, this is not happening. So we sent the product to Europe to get formulated. The guys came back and said, it's fantastic product, it's enough lathering. I said, you have to understand the context. India works on super high lather, not less lather. So let's try and formulate based on that. And that was like a dialogue, and then they worked and we worked with them to kind of figure out and reach out and answer ourselves. Yeah.
I think from a brand perspective, we approached it saying, why are moms uncomfortable today? Right? And moms were uncomfortable because they looked at every brand that was on offer, and the brand basically said, choose me because I am here since 100 years, 125 years, 50 years, and so on. Right? And so that was the narrative saying, I'm safe, gentle, and I've been around for so long. The question we had as a brand was, as a new brand, how do you then convince a mother? Right? Saying, I'm new, I'm not around, but you still trust me. And we then pivoted the opposite extreme. So our choice was, we know you're a mom who's super worried about your child and what goes onto the skin. We will go the other extreme and give you an overload of information, right? Which is why we had certified toxin-free. We found the best toxin-free certification in the market and we did that. But we didn't just do one certification. We found the 5 other databases which had the stringent norms on what you can and cannot put. We tested each product against those norms and we put up an entire rating chart on a website, right? Saying, hey, if you're a mother, you know you have on the product. If you want more information, then it's on the pack. If you want even more information, then come, right? And if you want even more information, come talk to us, right? Because of the customer care executive. And so the training was, if you are in that cohort of moms who's uncomfortable not knowing, we'll make sure we are the brand who tells you the most.
So for the benefit of our audience, 100% natural ingredients, is it safe to say that they are non-harmful?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think it is, so ingredients could be all natural, but they could come together to become really toxic. So it's, first is, of course, ingredients need to be safe in their own aspects, and then the final product that comes together needs to be safe by itself as well. There's a lot of times that ingredients don't sit well together, and hence the final formula is not really safe for you to use because it will catch microbial growth, it will have all of it happening, so in which case it's not safe. And natural products more often than not than synthetic ones actually get more of this as an issue than the others, right? So it's very important that the entire product per se is also safe enough.
So was any of your product, after manufacturing, after producing, you realized that it should not go to shelf? Never saw light?
So there's a lot of testing that happens before launching the product. So there's been a lot of cases where the formula has got finalized and failed during testing. But by the time you launch, you've pretty much tested everything in picture. So the testing on a final product lasts almost 9 months after the product's gotten made. So it's fairly enough large time for you to figure out if something is going to go wrong, you to kind of tend to figure it out.
And any product was never, in existence wherein the public didn't like it, the consumers didn't like it.
Oh.
Or the mothers who had a negative perspective on it.
We've had those. So I think over time, we realized that we are a problem-solving brand for moms, right? So I'll give you an example. So there was a wave, once COVID hit, there was this big wave on self-care, right? And a lot of beauty brands really scaled. Self-care became a big theme and a big topic. And in that self-care conversation, some customers started asking us saying, hey, we love all your products, why don't you have any body scrubs? Right? Because body scrub was one category that really picked up. And so we launched a body scrub, but it failed, right? And we've had that. That's one example. And it failed because when we spoke back to the customers, there was a very small select set who said, I love your brand so much that I'll use anything that you offer. But a large set of consumers saying it doesn't sit well, right? As the mom's company, you're supposed to solve for my concerns as mothers and for babies and post-motherhood or post being a mother. Where does a scrub fit with Jamani, right? So we've had those cases as well, and then we stopped manufacturing that product. I think from us, the idea was you never know what can be a great hit for the brand and what can really spread lots of joy and love. So we launch whatever moms are asking for, but then only a few of them really get massive scale.
Makes sense. How did you happen to combat the launch of new companies that were started coming in? I noticed that even Mamaearth came in 2016. So how did you combat those threats, those struggles or challenges probably, from the new entrants?
So it was all about being very focused on the customer and very focused on the product and the offering that you did, right? Because newer people will always keep coming. Luckily, we had an advantage of being one of the first movers. So Mamaearth and I started almost at the same point of time, right? We started, in fact, 6 months after they had actually launched their products. So and through the course, we saw so many other brands launch during the phase. But I think the constant focus on your product, your offering, and what the company stands for, that kind of worked the best for us in terms of creating a brand that became like a household name.
And back in those days, I think D2C was a very, very new term.
Yeah.
So did you ever had a thought of, not coming with this product as a D2C brand or maybe something else?
I think we didn't have an option. There was no way we could do retail. We didn't have the monies for retail. We didn't understand the challenges of retail. So there was no way that could happen. The only way we could make it work was because we said there was a large set of people who had moved online and become comfortable in putting on their details. So to give you a perspective, I remember one of our first few customers was a celebrity. And at that point of time, she sent me a message saying, "Are you sure I can put my credit card details on your website? Like, is it even safe?" And so that was the time, right? Like, people thought that putting in your credit card details, you could just swipe off all the money from their bank account because, it could get leaked. So, but people who are getting open to shopping online. So I think it was a natural progression for us saying, because had we had to do retail, imagine where would I launch from? If I launch only in Delhi, I would never become big enough, which means I had to be present in a lot of places, which meant a lot of distribution, a lot of product, a lot of working capital. We didn't have capital for all of that. So D2C was the way for us to go.
Interesting. And how was your first round that you raised? How many term sheets did you have in terms of figuring out which one to go and which one to,
The first round we raised was actually quite tough. It was a similar environment as it is today, if you remember 2014-15, where the entire press and the story around startups was very negative. So the first round was tough. We got 7 people to put in an angel round, right? Angel investing was very new at the time. So we got 7 people to put in some money. That was 1 crore 15 lakhs as our first angel round. And with that, what we did was ensured that we had a very strong brand put out, right? Again, the thought was we have to work hard for moms to trust us, because this is a tough category which just relies on trust. So beyond the content and high quality product and all the information, you also need to really have a brand that looks trustworthy, right? It can't be one designer and then run off the shelf and so on. So we spent a large chunk of the money actually getting the brand and the product name, the brand name, the colors, logo and all of that in place. And I think that focus helped us get to our first proper round of investment, which happened a month into our sales. So March 2017 we launched. By April we had a term sheet from DSG and Sama, and they had been looking for products or for a brand in the mom and baby space because they really thought this is going to be the next big thing. And they liked Malika's focus in particular about branding and marketing and what it would take to get trust among mothers. And so that was the first time that we got funding from them. Over time, we built a great, deep relationship with them. And so we did a total of 10 million throughout our journey, fundraise, all of it actually from DSG and Sama. Every time we'd have multiple term sheets, multiple other people, but we'd go back and say, look, we're really comfortable with these guys. It makes a lot of sense. And so we'd go back to them and say, can you match this number? And they'd match, and then we'd just go on with life.
So a lot of, number game comes down to sales and marketing, and people call it, they're just same. But for the sake of, theoretical, let's call that they're good cousins. What do you think, which campaign actually led to the creation of the real solid sales, the revenue top line for Moms Go?
I don't think there was any one as such, right? There was series of campaigns and series of marketing that you did throughout. And I think largely because our category was very different. We had to sell trust. and we had to get people to trust in us, right? So the trust doesn't get built from one campaign, it builds from a series of actions that you take throughout. Your customer care, what you put out as content on social media, what you put out as throughout. So there was a lot of effort that went into that. I think the one campaign that got us a lot of attention from all the big FMCG giants was when we launched this campaign on an age-controlled range, basically. That was the campaign. And I think what stood out for them was that a new age brand had kind of created a narrative which seemed like a narrative that should have come from, you know, like the big FMCG for people. And the second thing that they said was, it was a very interesting choice of celebrity. We had chosen Kalki for the campaign. So it was a very interesting choice of celebrity. It was a very interesting choice of conversation that we picked up on aging because it was on ageless expressions. And it was a very neat creation of an ad that hit home for most of the people at that point of time because what we launched was retinol. But to make it true to the brand, we did a natural alternative to retinol. And retinol was a very prevalent conversation at that point of time. So we launched, and within a month or 2 months, L'Oreal launched its retinol range. So in that range, we actually, from a research perspective, beat the bigger guys, came out with a natural alternative. And of course, the campaign messaging and everything was very nice. So that, I think, kind of got us attention from most of the top FMCG firms. Yeah. And that was just... I think that was the campaign, and within 2 months post that was where, so the campaign launched in November. Jan was when every FMCG CEO was in the office, and our conversations from then started on acquisition.
Yeah. I think the other great campaign we did was the launch of our baby care range, right? And so we launched pregnancy care as our first range of products in 2017, and over the next 1 year, basically we had 6,000 people who had shopped on the website, right? And we knew they were all pregnant at that point of time. And so our baby care launch, we said, what's the best way in which we can create a splash? We created this mega Excel sheet with a little bit of code and a WhatsApp number attached to it. And then we sent individual messages to each of those customers saying, hey, thank you for trusting us for your pregnancy. We now have a baby care range launch. We have a free baby sample pack. If you can just confirm your address, we will send this to you for free. Right? And so the amount of, and then we actually, our backend team, Malika and me included, for many days just sat and punched orders at the backend. So you have to do nothing. You just say yes on WhatsApp and we create the entire order and ship it to you. And the amount of word of mouth and positiveness that generated, because this was us being who we are, right? This is us as a brand saying, we know we're an upstart and you've trusted us. We just want to send you a baby care product. That was, I think, the cheapest and most effective campaign we've done because the amount of love that got us at the end of it was phenomenal. And so no money spent, just samples sent to 6,000 customers.
What was your experience in a way which achieved the threshold, which made you to make the largest exit in India?
I think it's a lot of steps along the way, right? Many, many steps. So think of it this way. Acquisition is pretty much like a marriage, right? And marriages happen between two people, and then there are families and their backgrounds and etc. Everything that comes along with it. The conversations that we were having during our acquisition time was we were talking to FMCG companies and pharma companies and also Good Glamm, where eventually the deal happened. But with everyone, the conversation was different. So with FMCG guys, they were saying, you've built such a strong, sharp brand, sharply targeted towards moms and babies. You don't have a retail presence. For them, the story was, if they acquire us as a brand, then they could give us great retail presence and a lot of sales and a quick uptick, right? So that's why it made sense for them. Pharma companies looked at us and said, hey, we work with so many doctors in gynecology and pediatrics. These doctors already recommend many of our other products and they like us. If we have your products, which we don't have, cosmetics, then it makes a lot of sense, right? And so for them, the story was, in the pharmaceutical channel, in the doctor channel, where they have a strong presence, Momsco was a great fit for them. And with Good Glamm, the story was again different, where Good Glamm was going out into the market and saying, raising money on the fact that I have content and then I have commerce and this is interlinked because from my content I can drive sales. They already had Baby Chakra. And Baby Chakra was at that time the largest mom and baby content platform. And so there the story became, hey, if I have that, instead of building a brand from scratch, the Momsco is a perfect addition to our family where now through that content I can drive commerce. So every potential acquirer had a different story of how we would fit in and help them elevate the game. But the consistent thread from there was sharp brand, not really competing with any other places, has done great things so far, and we think there's a huge potential for us to really make this much larger.
But was there any vision specifically to the exit as well?
So from our side, we reached a point of time where at the exit we said, great job done so far, right? Sharp brand, very sharply targeted e-commerce. In our heads, we always wanted to create a number 3 mom and baby player globally. Right? That was the one vision statement on which all of us are going. And then we looked at the gap and the distance we had to cover between us and that number 3 place. And we said, what would that need? That would probably need a brand with global presence, or we'd have to build that presence ourselves. That would mean lots of retails, we'd have to build retail ourselves. That would probably mean lots of languages and different teams in different countries, right? So we have to do that ourselves. So the question for us was, if that is the overall vision, do we want to spend the time, energy, money it needs for us to do that and do it over the next 20, 30-year period? Or should we partner with someone and try and do it in the next 5 years? And so for us, that speed and that accelerated potential of doing it in 5 years is very exciting from a brand perspective.
Got it. Let's shift gears to a certain set of advices for our audience. Yeah. Different founders look at different financial metrics in terms of assessing the company, whether it is viable or whether it's going in the right direction. Are we looking at what we had intended for? What were those financial metrics for you?
Always look at financial metrics from 2 lenses, which is one is performance and one is on potential, right? Performance is how is the company doing today, which is brass tacks on revenue, cost, EBITDA, cash flows, all of that, right? Which is no debating the performance numbers. The potential numbers is, do you have the right things going into scale, right? So for us, the potential was, what is the repeat at a customer level? Because that tells you where my customer journey will go from here, right? We were looking at repeats at a product level. That said, are my product driving the right level of repeats, and therefore will the products grow, right? We were looking at brand health, right? And brand health metrics. So are we right in the consumer's top of mind or in the response, right? Do the consumers see us, and what sort of brand do they see us as, right? So second is the one metric almost per function. That said, are we on the right track from a potential perspective so that we see demand growing and business growing, and also our ability to support it operationally?
So I think I'll just add to Mohit's point, right? So other than this, what we did was that every team had 3 core numbers. One that focused on how are you improving cost structures across the company, and that would extend for marketing, operations, HR, everyone. The other was how are you contributing to profitability eventually for every vertical. And third was that what is that new thing that you're building, right? It could be something in terms of a tech, it could be something in terms of a process or whatever. And those 3 things for us got monitored for everyone who was one down to us, and then of course trickled down across the company. So it was all across cost, profitability, and what new are you building.
Fair. When did you decide how much to raise, when to raise, and probably the partners you want to raise from?
What is the potential we want to go after, right? So at every stage, for example, the first fundraise that we did, we knew we have the product in place, we want to now spend money in marketing and brand building. So we raised for that. In the second round of funding, we said we really want to go and try retail. The overall e-commerce business seems okay. So we raised money for retail at the second point of time, right? When we then did the Kalki campaign, which really expanded us from a pregnancy and baby brand to a pregnancy, baby, mother, woman brand, we said now let's go and raise money to actually build the brand among a larger set of audience, which would need a lot more money. The next fundraise would have been, if the acquisition hadn't happened, then the next fundraise would have been, can we go much bigger in retail and launch a couple of countries? And so it's always, ideally what you've done with the money so far is you've created a strong business with good performance and potential. And then you're saying, what am I going to really unlock or create with this next round of money that I have? So it was more that as a benchmark rather than a time frame.
Yeah, and also, I think just to add to his point, right, it's also about how the competition is panning out. Sometimes you also raise money just to shut competition off.
Or to
right?
keep
like,
up.
Yeah, because you would, when we started, there weren't too many D2C companies. So there wasn't enough competition, so you could do things at your own pace. Very quickly, the scenario changed where there were too many of them who came up, which meant faster growth, more marketing, more conversations for which you needed to grow. So I don't think there's any clear answer to it. It's about, one, when you feel right is when you want to kind of do the fundraise. Let's not base it on how much dilution is going to happen, honestly, but broadly on when you think the time is right. And that time is a combination of what you're doing internally and what's happening externally.
Because more often than not, founders end up raising and not utilizing, and the cash is lying idle. So is that a better space to be able to futuristically look for a potential?
I think that's very foolish. Because I'll tell you why, right? Because if with the money in hand you can reach a much larger scale, with everything externally working in your favor, you should not raise. You always raise on potential and you always raise early. But raising that early that you don't even know where you're going to use the funds, I think is just letting someone take your shares of the company at a much earlier stage than they should actually.
Yeah.
So push it out as much as you can, but at the same point of time have enough and more run rate for you to last, right? Because you can't reach a stage where, and fundraising is it's not easy. It's not like aaj kiya, kal tak term sheet aa jayegi, parson close ho jayega, by the end of the month you'll have the money. It doesn't work like that, right? There's a huge process around it. So at least have a fairly large run rate in front and do it when everyone thinks you're at the peak. Well, that's the best time to raise. You get the best valuations then.
We all have some regrets in our lives in terms of, the decisions that we take. Do you think if there's anything which you could have avoided and the story would have been different today for the Momsco especially?
So we're actually very excited with how the story panned out. I think we timed the entry and launch of the business and the exit at the peak cycle as well. So actually perfect. The brand's in good hands, right? Doing well. So all good. No, I think the only regrets around the brand would be minor, right? So there were some people who we lost who went on to do other jobs because we couldn't find them a great role internally. So to me, those team management were a few misses. I am in particular very proud of what the team has gone on and done, right? I sometimes wonder if even 10% of them, we had found them some interesting new experiment, something to do within the company, would we have created something even bigger, right? But otherwise, no, quite happy with where we landed.
And what do you think, Malika?
I think there were, there was one VC who once told me that I don't invest in first-time founders. And I actually walked out from that meeting saying, how silly is this? And I'm going to make him regret this sentence of his, right? Having said that, of course, he did regret it eventually. We were in his anti-portfolio list. No, but I think, I don't think I have respect for any other VC as much as I have for him right now, right? Because what he essentially was saying was that I don't want to pay for your learning experience. Right? Because as a first-time founder, you do waste money a lot of times because you've never done something before and you don't know what's the right way to do it, right? And I think the second time around when I build something, I will make sure that a lot of that does not happen. A lot of money could have gotten saved by having people on board who knew how to do that part of it really well. So I think just that.
Unintentionally challenged you to move ahead.
No, actually, I reached a stage in my life where I was unmoved by anyone's statements. I was like, I will do what I have to do and then we will talk in the end. But it stayed with me because the point was, why would you not? And he said, it's super expensive to fund a first-time founder because I'm funding your learning, essentially. And it was so true. Because
you became more cautious, is it safe to say that?
No. I still did the mistakes I had to because you will make the mistakes you have to and it is a part and parcel of doing a business, right? None of us and none of you when you graduate, right, would be able to manage HR, operations, marketing, branding.
Finance.
No, not finance, I was getting to people.
Yeah.
How do you learn the art of managing people?
Yeah.
And their expectations and their life goals and what they want out of their jobs and their motivations, right? There was just so much into building and you're learning all of this as you're also learning how to make that lotion, how to sell that lotion, what to ask the customer as the right question, what is the campaign going to be like, right? So there's so much happening in your life and there's practically no right answer for a lot of things, right? The people say that parenting doesn't come with a book. Even entrepreneurship doesn't come with a book because every entrepreneur will have his own story, his own learnings, his own non-learnings, right? There's so much there. And I'm sure when I do something again, I will again make mistakes, but hopefully not the ones I made the first time around, right? So that's my only saving grace. Well, I actually had the conversation with him. I went back to him and I said that huge respect for what you told me that day. I think probably I will kind of also stay away from, getting someone to invest in someone who's never done something before.
Fair. We have a very interesting round now. So I have a very small segment which says, who between the two of you?
Oh, okay.
So who takes care of home? Who takes care of kids most of the times? Who resolves the conflicts first? Who annoys the most? Who parties the most? Who's the best storyteller?
Me.
Okay, her.
Awesome. And either of you could take a jab at the next few of questions. Any momentous early failures or successes of the Moms Co?
We learned the art saying not every product is going to be a success for you. And you need to figure out a way to cut the money that is spent on advertising for that product and shut the product early on. We didn't do that for a couple of them. Yeah. So we launched teas very early into our journey. So we were doing skincare and we were doing food. And that tea came up with a lot of struggle because it was getting imported from Europe. The manufacturer rejected me twice before actually sending it across and all. So I was in love with the product. So I didn't want to shut it off. But it was a super expensive tea. The consumers were shouting out loud saying, "Bahut mehenga hai, bahut mehenga hai, bahut mehenga hai," and I did not listen to them. And it did cost us quite a bucks because we kept spending money on advertising for that product, which had no legs.
Yeah.
One
For me, the
area-
successes were around consumer stories. Like
Yeah.
always. Like those just kept me awake and excited at night. So I had this one email printed out on my desk for the longest time. This was a customer, I remember she had written to us from Cochin. Right? And this was only when we had pregnancy care, first year, so very early days. She said, I have to tell you this story. I am lying on that hospital bed giving birth. Okay? And the nurse looks at me and says, "Oh my God, what is this belly? You have no stretch marks. I've never seen such a clean belly in my life. And I just have to write to you and tell you that this is all thanks to you guys, and I'm so glad I trusted you, and this was the best decision I've taken." So those we had a lot of those really interesting moments, right? There was another example where I remember in Chandigarh, this woman calls up at 10:30 at night when Malika and me are customer care executives at that point of time. And so we get this phone call and she says, "Listen, I need this delivered to me by tomorrow. And baby gift box, I placed an order already, but can you please make sure it gets delivered to me?" We said, "Of course, we will fast track it to you, but what's the urgency?" She said, "Oh, I'm in labor. I'm going to the hospital right now to give birth." And our reflection was, can you imagine you've hit such a nerve that you've created a product, this woman is going to
On
give
her way to
birth
deliver. Yeah.
slightly ahead of schedule, and one of the many things on her mind is, can I get your products? And so that's the other story that we kept telling the team, guys, this is why you have to be honest and do the right thing and like create amazing products, because that's the level of trust and faith customers are putting on you.
Fabulous story. One area you've seriously improved in and you still struggle with?
One area where I personally think is I did not know that I had a very strong people bone, but I learned it during the course of running the Moms Co. I think my role very, very quickly became to figuring out how to energize the team. There was a joke on the floor said that my mood kind of dictated the mood of the entire office. So if I walked in happy, everybody was happy. If I walked in sad, everybody walked in sad. So
Who was responsible for your sadness?
A business? They're not just highs, there are lots and lots of lows, right? And more than that, there was always a point in time when you would walk in with like, "Oh, we're killing it in life, we're killing it in life." And then you would walk into your room and say, "Mohit, if this money doesn't hit in day after tomorrow, we can't pay payroll."
Yeah.
Right? But everyone outside had no clue of what was happening. So there was a lot of time when there was this face that you would always, a very strong, brave face that you would always put out. But and when the money actually hit and the payroll got paid was when you were sad. Like okay, like that's it. And the other thing entrepreneurship really does for you is, like as Mohit said, right, like very strong highs and very strong lows. So when it is like this, then you're super bored. So
Yeah.
So
But the businesses get created in that
yeah.
that
So,
super
like,
boring
bored.
phase when actually the stuff happens.
Yeah.
Your leadership style at work?
I'm quite hands-off. My typical reaction is I've hired great people and given them a goal. And so I really want them to figure it out. And if they have a problem, they'll come to me. Right? So I'm very hands-off. So actually in office, I tend to have a lot of free time to do other stuff because I trust people a lot more, and then have a few reviews and they'll come back. So very hands-off. I trust you, you'll get the job done.
I was very hands-on. I had check-ins in the morning with everybody. So my calendar was full of just in meetings and meetings. But a large part of it was to, I very quickly realized that, after about 3 years of running the company, you become quite redundant because you've hired a marketing head who has done marketing for 20 years, right? And all across in everything. You've hired your finance head who was a CFO of another company. So there's not much that you can actually contribute to their, what they need to perform on a day-to-day basis. But then your role actually becomes on how do you enable them to achieve the next big thing in their life, right? So a lot of collaboration between two teams, a lot of collaboration between the others, trying to understand what are their struggles, because no matter whether you may not know everything of what they're knowing, but what you know is your product, your company, what you're building, and what's your vision, right? And how do you align everybody to that vision and keeping them true to the mission is what a large part of your job became. So I did a lot of check-ins, but I helped people a lot. So I have done people's jobs, everyone from like a social media, not an intern, but a social media executive's job to the marketing head job when he couldn't do his job. So, and I think creating an environment where they could just walk up and say that I want this done. So I had like the massive rifts with everybody in the company. And Mohit used to always joke and say that I don't know what is your leadership style, that you can yell, scream at them, and you could also go out partying with them on the same evening, and they're okay with both. But even if I pass a comment, they take it to heart. So I was very involved with everything that they were doing.
2 words on non-negotiables when hiring.
I think lying for me is a big no-no. So if I ever figure out during hiring that you've made a pitch which doesn't show up in your, or shows up as the other way during your ref checks, is a definite no. Clear cut, you can't just start a relationship on lies. That's out for me. The second is if you're not skilled. Like I get energized by super smart people. So if you're not super smart, I will not get energized with you and we will not be able to work together for a long time.
What is it for you?
I think the one thing that you cannot change in a person or that you can't teach or coach is drive, right? If someone is, like I fundamentally believe if someone is driven and really wants to achieve in life, they will do it wherever they go. And I used to seek out those people and get very energized by them. And I loved coaching, teaching, giving people tools to help them really achieve that. But if someone is not driven, you can't do much to change it.
Have you ever fired someone for a silly reason?
No. Not a
We
single
were very
reason.
bad at firing, actually. We're terrible at firing. In fact, one of the learnings we had was that it's not working out, you fire people sooner than what we did.
Yeah.
So,
And again, going back, over time, this reinforced my idea on hiring as well, that if someone is not driven to learn, right, no matter how much you try and teach, at least I wasn't able to change that perspective. And so there we ended up, or at least I'd say my fault was I would spend too much time trying to teach the person and therefore waste time and energy and resources for the company.
Ever thought of getting into the race of unicorn?
always. Why shouldn't you?
Then why didn't you?
No, because what we realized was that to get to being a unicorn here would take up the rest of our lives. Because the segment that we chose was mom and baby, which wasn't really very large. And it was about spending too much time at that. Like we would grow old building a unicorn, so we thought it's nicer to sell it off. And then again, create something that can be a unicorn. But
What's in the making?
I don't know. Actually.
It's in stealth.
It's in stealth mode, as we will call it. Like that's the new word. It's in stealth mode.
If given a chance to acquire any of your competitor, who would that be?
I would acquire M Caffeine. Yeah, I think it's a very strong brand. Yeah.
M Caffeine.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong brand. It's built on very nice cores. The team is really nice. So there's not too much work that you would have to probably
What would it
do
be for
on
you?
that one.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't acquire anyone actually. It's really interesting, and more because I know all of those guys now, especially after the exit. We don't compete anymore, so now they're all very good friends, and I really appreciate what they've built, and I understand why, or I've gotten to see the nuances of the person and then the culture they built in the company closely related to the brand. So it's all very tightly integrated. I think if I acquire any of those brands, I'd be a little bit of a misfit. So at least in my head, it's easier to start fresh rather than acquire.
Guys, we open it for the audience. Anybody who has a question?
Sir, like you mentioned a lot, like in your talk, mentioned a lot about managing people, like trusting them and like maybe talking to them good, like with good mind and all. So maybe like I had a question. Like I've worked in a few startups till now, but all online. So it's a little harder to manage people online with the founders telling their problems that everyone are in 10 different cities with 10 different moods. Somebody's bad. Few people get wake up late. So how did you maybe apart from trusting people and all, how did you manage people maybe like 3 to 4 key points on how to manage people and get them along your own path?
So, I think one, online did not work for us very long. So, as soon as there was an opportunity to go back to work, we came back to work, like always. What we did when we were online was that we had a lot of forums in which discussions were open. So, we would do a one-on-one. The HR was on a super high overdrive at that point of time because they would constantly have every hour there was a meeting with the particular individual. So you would speak to them and you would figure out what they were doing. But as you very rightly said, there were a lot of people who got identified as laggers because suddenly someone actually in the team from our design team actually once said that I'm not available 11 to 12. And the marketing head used to be a mother. And her son would go, not in the creche, but the son would be up obviously early in the morning and she had to finish work by 4. So imagine a team lead who has a team member who is not working during the same hours that she is most conducive for her to work in. And when we spoke to that guy saying, where are you every now and then? He said, 11 to 12, I go to the gym. And he just said it like that. 11 to 12, I go to the gym. So which means 10:30 he leaves, 11 to 12 he's in the gym, 12:30 is when he comes back to office. And I remember the HR calling me up and saying, what is it that I do? Like he says, I need it for my mental health right now. These are the times when you become a little strict as well. And honestly, I did not mind playing that part, right? Like I said to you, please call him up and say it's not acceptable. You can please feel free to do it, but we will mark you on a half day. If you start work post 12, it's half day for you. Now it's your choice to take because at 7, I'm very happy you leave, you go to the gym at 7. But you can't go to the gym at 11, which is in the middle of the day where everybody else is working as well, right? And she was uncertain of whether having that conversation or not, but I said, please do it. He said, what if he leaves? I said, let him leave. But because if you don't control it then, everybody else will believe it's normal to do it because by the time we got to know this was happening, the whole team already knew, right? And he's already wasting everybody else's team. And it cannot be normal. So there are a lot of times that irrespective of what the potential in the person is or how great the employee is, if there's something that cannot be construed as the culture, you kind of put an end to it. And that was what certain things it is. We stayed super in touch with everybody to know what was happening in everyone's life. So there were cases where people said that I don't have food to cook because my cook's not coming, I don't know how to cook, mom and dad are not here. We also sent food to them. So Zomato did deliveries to their house, right? And there were those little things that made a difference. So you were speaking, but you're not just listening, you were really listening and kind of creating a solution for them, which got people to be more open to having conversations. And that kind of helped. But I'm a big propagator of work from office. So moms always had work from office. Getting people back to work was really hard, but it was either you come back or you leave.
Yeah. If you think about what helps startups succeed, right, more broadly, I think startups succeed when they are faster than incumbents, right? You can get stuff faster, go to market faster, deliver faster, products, etc., etc. What drives a lot of that speed at times is flexibility, right? The fact that people can get reallocated quickly, that you can manage your time, resources, money very fast. And I think what wrongly happens is that a lot of this flexibility gets assumed as team members not knowing what to do when they come into office and you give them stuff to do on the day, right? How each team member is adding on to a big overall or their goal is unclear. When you're working from office, a lot of this can get resolved, right? Like Malika had this amazing open door policy. If someone wasn't clear, assuming they're driven, they'd walk into her room, get clarity and go back. What we realized was when you went to work from home, right, a lot of those small interactions got lost, right? And so in your office, we could look out from our cabin and say, hey, that person looks lost, he doesn't know what he's doing, call him and have a quick conversation. That didn't happen in work from home. So to your point, I think what as a startup, we and a lot of other guys had to learn in the work from home model was, how do you manage this balance of being very flexible and very agile with people knowing what to do and how to deliver it and what are the goals and targets. Right? And that balance pivoted a little more towards structure rather than full openness.
You had a question?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about post-launch of the product, but when we talk about the pre-launch, like you were mentioning that the product might be suitable for Europe, it's lathering enough, but not for India. So one, how do we tackle those things? Second would be when the formulation is still in the process, the research is happening, it's still like on the way to get approval. So what's the sample size, how the tests and the trials go on? That's the
So to answer the first part of your question, we had a team within the company which would constantly look at new products. So and the way you studied new products was what are the new products that are launching on Amazon and on websites here, right, within India, and what are the new products that are launching internationally. So every week in the check-in that we had for marketing, they would bring out, every team member was supposed to bring out new ideas of what is happening internationally that's not really happening and what are the great things that have happened in India that you've really liked. That kind of helped us create a pipeline for new products, right? And that was like one stream. The other was, of course, that the ingredient suppliers would keep coming back to you with options as well. So your suppliers did this. So the backend kind of gave you inputs of these are the great ingredients that are playing internationally. This is what you could create with them. And through marketing, which was within your team, who would create saying this is what's happening in the world right now, right? And then you would from there pick up most of it and then identify what are those few things that sits in really well with your brand and pick up on those products and put them into the developmental cycle, which is where it moves. And a large part of this happens at the marketing stage, right? The marketing team would do that. And then it goes to the NPD, which is, in our case, we used to share a brief on how should the performance be, what the product is going to stand for, and what are the key ingredients that the product needs to have. So those ones given to them, they will start the process of formulation. Once the process of formulation starts, actually its testing is quite standardized. Like it's given to you saying that for a process, for a product to be dermatologically tested, there are these 3 labs in India who can do it for you. They have their processes set, so they will tell you this is the amount of sample I need, and you sort of provide them so that they could do the test for you. So that part of it is actually fairly standardized. So you just kind of meet up to that. The prior part of what you should launch and how you figure out the market for it is a much harder task. And that's actually the real key job as well.
Thank you so much for your time. Just also just have like a kind of a bit hypothetical, but also like a lot of new age entrepreneurs are looking forward of not sharing any more equity, like trying to build a company without raising VC funds. Given a chance to you guys, would have not raised the funds back then and then carry on?
I get the question, and I think it's a very interesting question. So the first time around, I don't think we could have done it without raising funds. And I don't think Momsco would have been what it is, because what raising funds allows you to do is that whatever take you 10x time, it just reduces the time spent considerably for you, right? Because you have the resources to put out the advertising, you have the resources to hire talent, you have the resources to sort of set up an infrastructure, which would be very hard to do if you didn't have the money, right? So for instance, if we had to put in our own money, how much money would we be able to put in? Like we would have put in 10 crores, like definitely not more than that, right? But the marketing budget of Johnson's runs into thousands of crores, right? So there is no way you can even make a slightest of dent in the market with that kind of money and without people, because people are very expensive. Like they're not expensive from a company perspective, but if you don't have the salaries to pay them, how would you get them on board, right? And what interestingly we noticed was a lot of good talent goes to traditional FMCG firms, and the ones who are super aspirational and get bored, I'm talking about the really good talent, would come to startups because they want to grow really fast and then do something, which doesn't take about 6 months to get an approval from, right? They would come here. All of those resources are super expensive, right? And more than being super expensive, they wouldn't join you if you're not funded, because there is a lot of resistance in coming and joining family-run businesses because they believe that everything gets driven by the founders, which is very uncomfortable. Imagine a guy, so like my marketing head was heading L'Oreal Professional's business, right? So that caliber of person. Now, if they came to me because they knew there was an external system of reviewing that the investors bought in, there was a professionalism bought in from there, they are not the ones who are going to join you for, just a husband-wife couple who's running a business at a smaller scale, right? We were very clear that we wanted to build a large firm, we wanted to build a large company, and we wanted to do it quicker because speed kind of excites us, which is where all of it was practically impossible if we didn't have the funding, which is where we went in for funding. It's an interesting question because as we think of doing our next company, we're trying to figure out on saying that now do we want to put in our own money and do it, or do we want to still go ahead and raise funds? And it's an answer I still don't have, but most likely it will be the.
I had a question about handing over the reins to Malika and Mohit. So when did you decide about this exactly? At what point in the journey? And how did you cope up with this thing that okay, now that we know they are going to take over from us, what were the things that you prepared yourself for? Because I know as a founder, it's a very hard thing to do, right? How did you prepare yourself for that?
So the really hard part of the conversation was before the acquisition happened, because for a long period of time, I was in the camp saying I think this is the right time, and Malika wasn't, and but it took a while for us to align, saying yes, the timing, market scenarios, and so on are correct. And so I think the really hard conversation was that. Once the acquisition happened, at least for me personally, it was like a switch, because I had spoken to enough people who had gone through a similar journey before, and they had all said that once the acquisition happens, you have to realize that you are now entrusting someone else with the baby, right, effectively. And so you cannot continue being that strong a voice in the room. It's just unfair to the brand and to the acquiring company. So for me, it was very much a switch. In fact, formally, the conversation we had with Darpan, founder of the acquiring company, was on paper, we'll be here for 2 years. Within 2 years, for sure, the handover and transition should happen. But we're going to work hard with you to accelerate so the transition is as quick as possible, right? Because I think it's in everybody's interest that the new team takes on, the brand is in the new shape, right? Whatever you need to do with the brand is done, and we are fully here for as long and as fast as possible to get that done. And so the journey happened, which is acquisition effectively got formalized in December 2021. By July, August, actually, a lot of the handover had happened already. And so we initiated the conversation saying, look, I think the rules of the handover have already happened. So instead of waiting for that 2-year time frame, let's see if we can do it in a year and some odd months. And so that a little bit of paperwork had to happen. And I think after the paperwork was done by February of this year, effectively, so 8 months before original time frame, we handed over the business fully, right? And I think that was the best piece of advice that we got, right? That once you've handed over the business, once the acquisition has happened, you have to make sure that this transition happens as quickly and seamlessly as possible. It's best for everybody.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your insights today. So actually, I'm also planning to build something on the same space, something around kitty parties. Kitty party as it's a community-driven sort of a platform that can enable people, and at the same time give a marketplace for women to also put out their product. And I was seeing through Momsco's website, you're running something called Momspreneur right now, right? So what advice would you like to give me if, let's say, I'm trying to build around the same space, and especially if, let's say, tier 2, tier 3 market is a little tough to crack into? Any advice that you figured out?
I think the best thing would be to first figure out what your pain points are. Right? Kitty parties have been happening for a really long period of time, but it's very unorganized by people figuring out and creating cohorts themselves to do it, right? If you want to do it at scale, what will it take? And you will get these insights only from the ones saying that you try and understand what their current pain points are, right? From the top of my mind, the few things that I can think of is, I don't think you can collate kitty parties in tier 2, tier 3 as much. Either you could create a format of kitty parties where do it in metros, which has a very, very moving crowd, which is where people are looking out for friends, and hence you create a forum for them to come together, exchange notes, and create like-minded people's groups, right? So that could be one thing that you could go down on. Otherwise, if it is in already existing forums, you have to figure out how can you cater with services for them. So for instance, if there is a kitty party, I would need catering, I would need something else, I would need a decor, I would need whatever, and I would need space. Right? So tie up with spaces and all of that. So either choose what is a bigger pain point. Is it ideally I am doing a kitty party to keep myself busy, in which case all of this becomes important, which is a social aspect for it. If it is the kitty party is to connect with like-minded people and otherwise, then you don't call it a kitty party, call it something else and create a forum for that, right? So I think just understanding what the real pain point is from a perspective that could give you really large scale is what you dig into and then create your company out of it.
And more broadly, I'll give you an example. We've invested in this company called BizUp, right? Where essentially Supan, the founder, landed on the insight that if you see how tier 2, tier 3 clothing shops buy products now, is they're constantly on YouTube, and on YouTube there are these wholesalers from Delhi and Bombay and Gujarat who are putting up long videos showing up their products and actually then discussing pricing and so on. And he said, this is the actual organic thing that's happening. Can I create a platform where this happens? The more interesting part is how he reached on that insight. So he was sure he wanted to do something in the B2B business. He basically spent a year visiting these groups like BNI, where they have businessmen getting together to discuss problems. And he immersed himself in that world for a year before coming up with the insight on, hey, this is what I need to solve. So on your idea, or anybody else who's working in an idea actually, my advice would be, see if you can actually immerse yourself in that world of your target audience, because the amount of learning you get from being part of that world is very different. I don't know how you get into tier 2 kitty parties. That you have to figure out. It's a harder one. But I think just be with the customer and be in that world. What helped us was, at the Momsco, Malika was already in that world on a daily basis. Right? She knew what moms are talking about. She understood the pain points. So when we spoke to 200 moms before launching or deciding, we already were very close to insights of what moms are looking for or not. Right? But that only comes by a complete emotion.
Guys, we can only take one more question in the interest of time.
When you got certain that this is the idea we all know well, so what was the first step that you took? Like, how did you know that this is something that we should start from? Because I get a lot of ideas, but I don't know what's the first step or what's the next step I should take.
So our context is very different. Maybe we could also discuss what one of your ideas is, and then I could give you a live example of how you could think about it. In our case, it was obviously on starting to making the product, because we were looking at selling a physical product, which meant, and I think in all cases it would be the same. Like even in his case where he wants to do kiddie parties, eventually he will have to make a product which will be an online website or something on it, right? In our case, it was a physical product. So all our exercise went into figuring out how do we create that product that we want to create, right? So it was about what is the problem that we want to solve for. This seems like, and is the problem a large enough scale to actually go after to create a fairly large business? And once you had both the answers as a yes, then you figure out and saying that let's start working on the product to physically see if we can actually create the product. And do we actually enjoy the process of creating the product, right? Because you can't be running a company where you just don't like the product that you're selling yourself, right? So then was of course that, in which what we did in our case was we had, through friends and connections and all of it, we reached out to toxicologists, which is basically the people who study formulations, and reached out to them in Singapore and otherwise from HUL, PNG, to kind of reach out to their teams to say that if I had to make a safe range of products, what does safe mean? So what will be the tests involved in it? What is it that I definitely do? What is it that I definitely don't do? Spoke to the regulatory people to just figure out saying what's the regulatory requirement around the product development. Figured both of them out and then started identifying a right manufacturer who could actually make all of these products for us. So you move into the space of super, super high research to get it all. And then once you have that, then if your product is ready, then you launch.
You know, one of the, as I now speak to a lot of founders, the angel investing journey and so on, a lot of the assumptions founders make is that I have faced this problem, therefore the world faces this problem, right? It's, I think it's fantastic to be able to generate ideas that you are personally feeling and you're passionate about. To me, step one is, can you create a large enough set of people to talk to and say, is this a big problem that they want solved? And how much would they pay for it? Right? That's the core problem. If you can't get those two answers, then you don't have a problem. And I think most likely 90% of ideas just fall off in that cliff, saying this is something you feel and you may pay for it, but a very large set of audience, given India's context, etc., may not. Right? There you'll find amazing examples on time as an example, right? So if you look at the theme of I will improve time, or I will give you back time in your life, you will see globally there's a huge set of brands that have launched and a huge set of products that have launched. where they give people back time, right? You have people coming in doing odd jobs in your house and so on. A lot of startups started in India with that insight, but then they quickly realized, you know what, in India people have a lot of time, right? And so they are willing to dedicate a lot of Saturdays, Sundays and do stuff themselves, but they won't pay for it. And so, right, if you just do that research on saying, is there enough of a set of people who face this problem and will they pay? I think you come to a good step on, hey, is this an idea worth pursuing? And then go down Malika's path of figuring out, is there a product, is there a brand to be made? Thank you. Thank you.